Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. You'll get 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Plus, enjoy access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with the welcome offer of 150,000 points, your business can soar to all new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
At this time of the year, I always like to do an episode or two on things that we can do to refocus, refresh, to get ourselves right as we head into our next year, our next season. New Year's always is a new time. We have new goals and resolutions and all those things. But we're coming off a very demanding, a very stressful time in our year, and that's the season. And, it takes its toll. And before we got going, my guest today, Patel, and I were just sharing some stories on what that looks like for coaches. It's stuff that we've experienced. We see coaches continue to experience, and we hope to shed some light on some things you can do moving forward so that not only for this time of the year, but as you get to the next season and start going through that you have a better plan. So Pratik, thanks for joining me. I've loved following your stuff. As I said, I listen to you on Eric Quorum's podcast all the time. Eric was here a year ago, and I'll share that link in our show notes. And we were talking about things to lose weight, which is always another area of concern at this time, but that won't necessarily be the focus today, as we mentioned. So again, thank you for taking the time.
No, thanks for having me. Excited to share things that I've experienced and done in this space to help coaches out.
The Apple Watch Series 10 is here. It has the biggest display ever. It's also the thinnest Apple Watch ever, making it even more comfortable on your wrist, whether you're running, swimming, or sleeping. And it's the fastest charging Apple Watch, getting you 8 hours of charge in just 15 minutes. The Apple Watch Series 10, available for the first time in glossy jet black aluminum. Compared to previous generations, iPhone XS or later required. Charge time and actual results will vary.
Yeah, this time of the year, as I mentioned to you, when I think back to areas of my life, when I was a high school football coach and when I was a college football coach, at the high school side, it was just getting to Christmas break, right? Getting away from grading the papers. The season was still fresh, trying to put that behind and have a new plan. But it was really like, I just need this break. And likewise, on the college side, coming off a season, all kinds of different factors at play to what is the future of this coaching staff, whether that's parts of it, the whole staff, looking at recruiting and all the things that you're doing on the road and what you're going to do, I guess, to squeeze those last things out before you do take a little time off for the holidays.
Yeah, and I experienced a lot of that too, just having worked at a few different places in college football and then in the NFL. Everything is very seasonal and cyclical where everybody has these big goals. It's like, look, we're going to hit the ground running. Either 2024 went your way and you want to continue to build off of it, or 2024 didn't go your way and you want to put it in the past and flush it and start over fresh with new ideas, new goals, whether it's specifically health focused on top of advancing in your career. And everybody's starting their new resolutions, and fitness is generally a top priority. And it's easier to start when you're really motivated, coming off a season where you've done a lot of damage to your body, late nights, access to good food and proper supplementation and workouts are kind of hit or miss. Food and drink is a little bit more of a vice and a comfort, depending on, again, how your season went. So a lot of coaches are definitely looking forward to just starting the year off right, not only for themselves, but also for their programs too.
Yeah. And the other key factor, which we definitely go wrong with during the season, is sleep, right? I don't know. I would love to take a survey and really see how many of us as coaches are getting the right amount of sleep at really any point in the year.
Yeah. And truth be told, look, not only playing football, it's a brutal sport, but coaching, being a staff member on football, there's nothing beneficial for your health about it. It's the price we pay to do something that we really love and enjoy doing, that we're really good at. And ultimately, the goal isn't to try to make every single area perfect. I think my biggest advice that I like to give a variety of different people, so you're not limited to being an athlete or a coach, it's just anybody in general, is before you start making these grand changes in your life and you're adopting these new habits, I think getting a handle and focus of this is where I'm at, this is my health status now. Because you're going to be inundated with an insane amount of information. There's so much information on health and wellness out there, coming from talking heads, people that just spout studies that have never actually worked with, people that don't necessarily know what life is like working as a coach in these scenarios and these environments. So the first thing that you really want to do before you adopt this new supplement routine or this detox protocol or this way of eating or exercising is, look, where am I at fitness level wise? What does my health tell me about myself? Have I gotten my blood pressure, resting heart rate done? Have I gotten my labs done? And using that information and crafting solutions to say, like, okay, this is where I'm at. This is potentially where I want to be. Now I don't have to try to do something 7 days of the week. I don't have to exercise 2 hours every single day, but this is my schedule coming forward. And this is what I can actually implement that makes a lot of sense, because the thing that really prevents coaches from sticking with things long term, and I've been guilty of this too, is if it's not sustainable and it doesn't fit within your schedule, it's going to be hard to just manufacture motivation to keep it going when time gets tough. Like maybe you're on the road scouting and recruiting. Maybe you're on cross-country flights. You're staying up late, you're sleeping in random places. You might not have access to specific gym equipment. The hotel is not appropriately equipped. Nutrition's, all right, well, now I'm eating on the road versus I'm getting all my food from home. So I don't have that home field advantage of being on the same time frame or routine. So understanding what is it that you can fit within your schedule? How much movement are you getting in? Do you have some specific morning or evening routines, regardless of if you're going to get good sleep or not? We know that when we are coaching and we have families at home too, it's going to be difficult to just put your head down and be like, yeah, I'm going to get eight hours of sleep. Cool. Well, that's probably not going to happen for the majority of the year, but whatever you can get, let's maximize it. So I think that's what I do when I work with clients one-on-one too. It's like, look, I'm not going to provide you with information. I'm not going to coach you until I know what's going on underneath the hood. I understand what your lifestyle is like, what your schedule is like. And then I take that objective and subjective data and I start layering in, okay, this is where we want to start within the next 1 or 2 months. This is what we're going to try to achieve. And once you're able to integrate that in and things go from new habits to familiar to routine, then we're going to start layering on top of it. Because if you try to be perfect and you try to fix everything all at once, you might be able to do that for maybe a week. And then life's going to happen. You're not going to be able to adjust to it. You can't handle all those responsibilities. And like true fashion, and I've done this, it's like, look, health is going to go down once everything with the job and coaching and the career comes in front of your face, because that's your livelihood. You can't push that off to the side and be like, hey, I'm going to take time out for the next 4 weeks and I'm going to work on my health and then I'll get back to you.
Yeah. Well, definitely on the college side, that AFCA convention is always a stumbling block to the whole thing, right? You leave all routine either way, go see a bunch of guys you haven't seen in a while, drink too much beer, stay up late talking ball, etc. So that one was always a little bit of a stumbling block to staying on that plan. But thinking of something you said there, what do you recommend for coaches to establish that baseline, to understand exactly where you are? Like for me, I always did schedule my yearly physical, so it was at the end of the year. And I can say, and I've told the story on here before, that I've come out of a season with just horrible lab tests and blood pressure and all the weight and cholesterol and all those things. I've actually since moved to doing something with functional health and Dr. Mark Hyman's lab tests. They're expensive. I think I paid $500 for them, but I have, I don't know what it was, like over 100 labs that were done so I could better understand where my health is right now. Fortunately, most of it came back pretty good.
That's good. It's funny you mentioned that. And again, I do the same thing that I recommend my clients, having 2 kids at the house and having Indian genetics. Like I got to stay on top of this stuff, because just because I have good intentions doesn't mean that I'm not going to be predisposed to having an issue if I don't make sure that I'm on top of it over time. And generally I do blood work twice a year. And I actually did sign up for Function. I got my test done 2 Thursdays ago. And that's the tough thing, where if you're relying specifically on your doctor, and this is not a knock on the medical community or doctors. I've got a family of doctors, and I'm the healthiest one out of all of them, and I don't have a PhD. You know what I'm saying? So you got to know exactly what you're doing. But they might not dive as deep into the blood work. They might not know exactly how to provide training recommendations for you. They might not know how to be like, hey, man, I know you have issues with sleep. This is what you can do to try to improve it. So again, they might have a fixed amount of time with you, or they just might not have been exposed to all these different areas. And look, this is what I was paid to do to handle the athlete's care. And it worked out really well, the places I worked at. So being able to look at everything as a whole and put together those plans is important. So yeah, I'm a big fan of getting blood work. And actually the price of function is pretty good comparatively to other full panels that have the same number of tests that are done, but it probably costs twice as much. So I'm a big advocate of really don't worry about what the blood work says. There's always going to be a way to improve upon it. You just don't know where you're at until you actually get that data. The blood work's never going to lie. So it's going to allow you to say, okay, this is where I'm at, and this is what I can actually do. So the good thing about something like function is it sifts through everything, it ranks it and says, this is where you need to start based on the most important markers that might not be within the ranges that they want you at. So they'll give you nutrition recommendations, they'll give you supplementation recommendations. So it takes the guesswork out of you having to do it yourself. Another thing most people could do, they might not think about this, is if you have access to ChatGPT, just throw your labs in there and it'll sift through whatever's been hopefully published and has credible evidence behind it and say, okay, if this marker is high, this is what you potentially can do. And you can even ask it for general strength training programs, or if you're well connected to the performance staffs that you may or may not have access to, you ask nicely to one of them, be like, hey, can you just help me out really quickly? Just put something this time frame, 3 days a week, and I'll end up doing it. So I think that really provides a huge amount of benefit. And the other thing that I like to recommend to people is get a body composition assessment done. Same thing, recommend for athletes, same thing for other clients. It's not to feel bad about yourself, but ultimately it's getting to that realization of this is what my health status is. This is where I'm at. How much muscle mass do I have? What does my bone mineral content and density look like? How much fat mass do I have? Where does it seem to be deposed on the body? How much visceral fat do I have? And then again, you can create these recommendations based on where you're at. And it becomes much easier to follow through with these health initiatives when you have something guiding you. And this is one big thing that we had great success with, even working with NFL athletes, that some dudes are just lazy. Some dudes just don't want to buy in. But it's like, hey, I got this data on you. I'm giving you this recommendation. And this is the reason why. Because this is your individual testing. This is your individual results. And if you don't improve, these are the potential outcomes, whether positive or negative. And it becomes that much more empowering when you're doing something specific for you, instead of, oh, I've always heard these general recommendations and I never really see people get better. Why would I want to take fish oil? Why would I want to take creatine? Why would I want to take magnesium? Why would I want to take vitamin D and K2? I'm like, oh, well, you're super low. And it's correlated to all these issues and your hormone status and your glucose control and a variety of other things. So I think getting that testing done is very important.
So you recommended body composition testing. Is there a specific protocol you like for that, or way to get that done you would recommend?
Yeah, I'm always going to advocate for something like a DEXA, because for populations that we know aren't very healthy, we want to look a little bit deeper. So yeah, knowing how much muscle mass you have is great. Knowing how much fat mass you have is great. And where is it in the body? But two things that I've seen on a lot of scans, so I've done DEXAs for the past 12 years. And one, as I mentioned before, is your bone mineral content and density. So basically, how much bone do you actually have and the strength of that bone in relation to how tall you are. So obviously, if you're lineman sized, you're going to have a lot more bone mineral content than a receiver, just based on, genetics and size. But the density and the strength of it is going to be a little bit different. So you get what's called a T-score and a Z-score. And what those compare you to are, one is just a general healthy population, and two is it compares you to your age-matched population. So the higher the number, the better. That just means that you're further ahead compared to everybody else that's within that range. So you want to be at least 1.5 or higher with that teen C score. But I've come back and seen a lot of people that are in the negatives, which means the strength of your bone is not very good. So these underlying things that you don't even think about, and obviously with poor sleep, a lot of stress, alcohol consumption, poor nutritional intake and diet, it erodes everything from the inside out. The other piece that DEXA allows us to see is, since it is an X-ray, it allows us to see that visceral fat. So generally in and around the trunk area, you have more storage of fat around the organs. So subcutaneous fat, we know that's right underneath the skin. Intermuscular fat, we know that it's the fat just deposed inside the muscle, but you also have that visceral fat and then fat around the liver too. So what we know about that is that number starts to accumulate. So you have an increase in volume or increase in total amount of grams or pounds. We can do the conversion pretty easily. That drives insulin resistance, and that's what drives chronic diseases. That's where you get the high blood pressure. That's where you get the issues with glucose control and prediabetes, diabetes. That's where the heart issues start happening. Everybody wants to blame single ingredients and all these other foods. It's like, look, it's a culmination of all these different factors. So if you don't know where you're at, it's hard to say like, hey, I'm healthy. But simple things like if you can get a DEXA, and you can, what I do for clients, because it's more prevalent now, which is nice. I legit am like, hey, what's your zip code? You don't have to tell me your address. Like, hey, tell me your zip code. What city you're in? And I just start Googling like DEXA centers, Google Maps, try to find the closest one. I'm like, hey, you've got one 3 miles away. Cool. These are the time frames that they have. Ideally, you do it first thing in the morning, fasted, hydrated, not having a workout the day before. And you go sit on it. Generally takes 7 to 13 minutes. You get the results like that. And then you can look at it and say, okay, this is where I'm at. This is how I can interpret my results. You can either try to figure out yourself or lean on somebody that you may have access to within strength conditioning field or performance department, or throw it up into Chat GPT. If you don't want to work with somebody, there's nothing wrong with that. So big fan of that methodology, just because there are other things that can be done, bod pod, in body, but they won't give you those like X factor measures that can really be very telling with, hey, this is where your health status is, or you're kind of trending in the wrong direction. And you want to know about that. You don't want to know about it 10 years later, like, shit, I could have got this done easily, but I never made myself go do it.
Yeah, easy things to do. The investment is worth it, I believe. Like I said, I did the Function Health. I'm sure there's a link. I'll put that in the podcast. And then we'll put, just so you have it, a little information on DEXA scan too, if you're not familiar with that, and be able to find some of those things. So I love being able to look at the numbers. I mean, we've come a long way where you hop on a scale and you see your weight, and that was about it. And now we can understand what's going on inside of us and other things that affect us. So it certainly gives us that baseline to help us shape those things. Listeners of our show know that I'm really into Chat GPT now. Just did an episode on how you could use it to build a stronger culture, but certainly you can use it to help your health and wellness. But numbers aside, looking at some practical things. Again, going back to that idea, we're coming up on a time. We do get to pause a little bit with the holidays and with some breaks coming up. What we can do, maybe a few tips for guys out there in general to start the new year refreshed, healthy, and with a good outlook for what you're going to do moving forward, regardless of what change you might be involved in.
Yeah, I think it all boils down to, how do you want to feel? What is it that you want to feel? The goal isn't to get to sub 10% body fat and have the biggest bench in the world. I think when we get to this age, especially if you've got kids at home, it's like, that doesn't mean anything to me. I want to be energetic. I want to feel strong and confident. I want to feel comfortable in my own body without having to try to look like I'm a cover model or look like Saquon Barkley. And I'm just naming off some of the athletes that I've worked with in the past. And I'm like, yeah, he's just a genetic freak. I'm never going to look like that, even if I did as, crazy courses of whatever. But first and foremost, I think understanding that improving the way we feel and look always starts with exercise. Like, everybody's in this longevity space. You see all these researchers, all the talking heads talking about it. The number one thing that really correlates to longevity is overall exercise. Like, you never really hear about anybody living to 100 years old that's sitting on the couch, significantly overweight or obese. Like, look, Father Time's going to catch up with somebody like that. And ultimately, there's a lot of confusion around what kind of workouts do I do. One thing that I had seen in person Obviously living in the weight room, being an assistant strength coach for a long time, we would see a lot of the coaches come down to work out, which is always a great sight. Not only is it a great chance to continue to develop a relationship with them, but it's always great seeing people exercise and take initiative of their health. But the default was to always just hop on a machine. I'm going to get on the Peloton. I'm going to get on the bike. I'm going to go for a run. I'm like, that's great and all. I'm a huge fan of aerobic training. But ultimately, building muscle mass and strengthening bones is a big part of longevity. Not to say we have to eliminate doing any conditioning, but you can still improve your fitness levels. You can burn fat and build muscle. The only way to really stimulate that is doing resistance training. So, okay, well, how many days do I do? Do I have to lift like an athlete? Do I have to lift like a bodybuilder? Ultimately, you can use something like ChatGPT to say, how many days do you have available? At minimum, you would want 2. At the most, you don't have to lift 5, 6, 7 days a week. Same thought process we work with athletes. Like, hey, when we're in season, we're not putting these guys through 5, 6 lifts. We're going to give them 2, maybe 3. And that's going to be enough to maintain. But if we're trying to see some improvements in strength and muscle mass, it could be 3 full body days. It could be 4 total days. You don't really have to push to those upper boundaries. And ultimately, it has to fit within your schedule. It doesn't matter if you do bodyweight stuff, you do bands, if you use barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, like everything can be an implement to improving your strength and muscle mass. So from an exercise standpoint, I will always advocate first and foremost for populations that you just don't know what your health status is. If you're a coach and you went through a brutal season, the last thing you really want to start doing is hopping on a bike or hopping on a treadmill and be like, I'm just going to start running. Because you're detrained. You're probably carrying too much weight. Your muscles aren't ready for it. Every pound over your ideal body weight, every step you take is 6 pounds of pressure to the lower limbs. You can imagine if you're 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds overweight, you haven't run in 8 months, and you decide to, hey, I'm just going to go start jogging because I want to get in shape. You're going to be in pain for 2 to 3 weeks. That's going to set you on the sideline. So again, strengthen the ligaments, tendons, joints, the bones, the muscles by doing some resistance training. You have to kill yourself. And then the other complement of that is just getting in movement. You hear a lot of people talk about the 10,000 steps per day. And ultimately for health, what they found is 8,800 steps. But even beyond that, there are 2 massive benefits to just consistently moving throughout the day. One is it's an easy, low impact way to accelerate fat loss. When you start getting to that 12,000, 15,000 step count, you don't have to cut back on what you eat. You don't have to add in extra workouts. I found for a lot of clients, it's the fat loss hack, just staying consistently moving. The second is it provides a great amount of cognitive benefit, and every coach on the planet could benefit for this. Just you're in your game plans, you're into thinking about what happened over the course of the past season, what can we do to get better, what does the roster look like, just consistent conversations dealing with everything football related. And it's easy just to get so deep into the weeds that your brain's just fogged out, you're tired, you're exhausted. It's good to take a step away from that. And they've done studies on this too. You can't use all the parts of your brain if you're just stuck doing the same things over and over again. You're sitting in front of a screen or you're sitting at a table talking with other people. You got to take a step away. So from a cognitive boost benefit, being able to just get steps in, hey, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes away from what you're doing, take a walk. Even better if you can do it outside, but obviously it's wintertime in the States, some places, it's going to be cold, it's going to be snow, it's going to be icy. Take caution if you do go outside, and then come back and get back into it. You'll be so surprised at how big of mental refresh it can be too. So there's 2 massive benefits to that. And the third is just overall general health. So again, thinking about how you're approaching these changes with, I want to improve my health. Okay, it starts with exercise is a big component, daily movement. And then the third piece is nutrition. It's going to be different for everybody. So ultimately, if you do get that testing done, that's really going to be a big guide to show you, okay, how can I manipulate what I eat, when I eat, how I eat? And those are the 3 questions everybody always wants to figure out. How much do I eat? When do I eat? What do I eat? But for most people, if we're talking about a population that wants to improve their health, being in a caloric deficit will help you with weight loss, fat loss. So for most people, it could be 250 to 500 calories under how much they're expending. And there's a lot of calorie calculators out there that are free. You just put in your information, age, height, weight, how many days you're training, and then it can spit out, this is what your maintenance level is. And then you just subtract from there and be like, hey, this is on average what I want to try to accomplish. in terms of every single day. But you can use an app. There's plenty of free ones out there. MyFitnessPal is probably the most popular one, but there are a variety of other ones. I really like Chronometer. It's the best that I've found, and I actually use it with my clients and my athletes that I work with. And it's free too, so you can't really go wrong with that. And then you just want to break it down. I think condensing your feeding windows and eating less times per day make it a lot easier to stick to something, because when you're open to thinking about things and figuring out things ad libitum, people generally, if they don't have a plan in place, they most likely will take the easiest route or the most comfortable route, which is, oh, I probably should get this chicken and rice and broccoli or whatever, but I'm just going to grab the burger and fries because I didn't plan this out. And I just have to eat right now because I got a lot of stuff going on. I got a busy day. So what I try to do for some of my clients is, look, just condense your feeding window and cut down the total number of times you eat. Like, look, you're not a child. You're not an athlete who needs 5,000 calories. You don't need a snack. So go high protein. Make every single feeding you have revolve around how much protein you want to eat, and then fill in the gaps. Where are my fibrous foods coming from? My vegetables, my complex carbohydrates, and consistency of, there's nothing wrong with eating the same things every day. And maybe you change up lunch or maybe you change up dinner, because as boring as that might sound, we all know this with everything in life, the fundamentals, the basics, the consistent things done right are going to get you the results you want. And people don't want to hear that. But unfortunately, that's what you have to do if you want to get to a place to really be empowered to take charge of your health.
Yeah, some good recommendations. I know, going back to the Function Health, and the one that stuck out to me, and I can't remember exactly what marker it was for, but like, it was, one of them was like, eat more tomatoes, like, right? Like, and it had to do specifically, I mean, I looked it up, and
it might be for the lycopene, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it was for the lycopene. Yeah. But just knowing a little, some of those things, okay, I'll make sure when I go to the grocery store, I'm buying tomatoes or stuff like that. But I think what really comes through in everything you talked about is, it is about making sure you keep this simple for yourself. The more, just like our offense and defense, the more complex you make it, the messier it can get, right? So having a clear understanding of, this is the plan. And I think it's about doing it for a while, right? Before you start to make adjustments, because we could get overwhelmed, just like every single coach will be looking at Twitter and see a cool play. There's going to be some information on health and wellness and longevity, and it will overwhelm you. And you'll start thinking, well, maybe I should be doing this or that. And then you end up so far off of where you were, where if you just stuck with simple, you'd probably put yourself in a better place much quicker.
Yeah. And you see, there's everything out there. Oh, this supplement. Oh, now this new training regime. Oh, this way of eating. And look, over the past 20 years, I've seen every nutritional fad come and go, every hot training methodology. And ultimately what it comes down to, the things that work are, what is it that you can stick with that resonates specifically for you, your physiology, your biology. And if I was going to write a tweet, and again, it's helpful, but it isn't. But ultimately, it is true to say, hey, 3 lift sessions per week, 10,000 steps per day, if more, great. 1 gram of protein per pound body weight, 3 meals a day, minimum half your body weight in ounces of water per day. And I mean, if you were able to stick with that and try to check those boxes, and you hit 80% of that, 90% of that over the course of 3 months, like, you would look like a different person by the time March rolls around. And that's not asking a lot. It's a list that has 4 or 5 things. It's not talking about you have to be in bed at 9 p.m. and up at 5 a.m. Like, look, life happens. You got a busy schedule. You got kids. It's not always going to be that perfect. But if you stick with it, it makes a huge, huge difference.
Well, Pratik, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's always good to hear from somebody who knows what coaches are going through. We could get a million experts out there telling us what to do, but I love the simplicity of it. Appreciate you sharing some ideas with us here, and we'd love to have you back again sometime soon.
No, I'm glad. Yeah, I would love to come back.
Thank you again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. As I mentioned in the introduction, we'll be taking a series-based approach to the podcast in 2025. Bringing you a network of coaches sharing their insight and perspective on the game. We've kicked off the sprint-based football series presented by Titan Sensors with host Tony Holler already, and you'll hear from Coach Holler every 2 weeks this year. We'll be kicking off our Think Tank series
presented by Modern Football Technology in January. These will be roundtable discussions with coaches on offense, defense, and special teams topics. Our Champions Series, presented by Signature Championship Rings, will also be back as a year-long series in 2025. This will also be in a roundtable format with 3 state champions discussing various topics and sharing insight on what's helped their program reach a state championship caliber. Lastly, we want to hear from you, and we'll have opportunities for you to contribute in our Your Call segments throughout the year. We want you to be part of the podcast in 2025. Follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com and follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.